Be yourself, be honest, be true to yourself. My ancestors on my father's side came to America, probably around 1880, 1870, something like that. Settled first in Elizabeth, New Jersey, where they ran, my great-grandfather and his two brothers ran what they called the kindest store, where they did a lot of indoor painting, architectural type work, a lot of wood embellishment work, decor work. They did a lot of work for like Rockefellers in the area. Little church around the corner, which was famous. They did all the artwork and interior decorating on that, plus a lot of other places in New York area. And that's actually even then where my grandfather was born, and he kind of learned a lot of that trade himself. My mother's family originally came from Ireland, English background anyway, and I don't know just when they ended up, in the United States. I know the earliest I've heard about them, they were in the Great Plains area, Missouri, Oklahoma territory. Some of her uncles and all, and even grandparents knew, like some of the outlaws or the younger brothers. And in fact, the aunt that my mother stayed with, her husband, his father knew personally some of those outlaw people, and even taught like Jesse James how to shoot. He was a crack shot himself and could ride from like Indian style on a horse and shoot beer bottles off a fence post, which I guess he was quite well known for. Some of them also were buffalo hunters on the Great Plains. And finally, my grandmother, after she was married, they came to Wyoming with my great-grandfather on her side, and some of their relatives, a lot of them went on to the Sheridan, Wyoming area. And but my grandmother, her husband, ended up in the Torrington area, north of Torrington, mostly because my great-grandfather had been stationed at Fort Laramie during the Indian campaigns, and he had talked about that, even though he went on to Sheridan with the rest of the family. And so then that's where my mother grew up there, just north of Torrington, on the homestead there. My parents, Jack and Eunice Kindest, they came from the Torrington area. Both grew up about 6 miles apart on ranches north of Torrington. And my father's family had a little bit of money, so they were buying up failing homesteads and build up a ranch. And my mother's parents had a little bit of a rough time with the Dust Bowl and all, and lost several places. And finally, at one point, my mother's dad had a horse accident and was having trouble. And they thought at the time they would go ahead and just move to Idaho, and pretty close to the Oregon border, Weiser, Idaho area. Thought that it'd be easier to grow crops and all and make a living in that area. Plus, my Aunt Louise had diabetes, and they thought it would be better for her that she could get better food from better growing conditions on the farm that they would try to put together there. So they made the decision to move out there. They had barely started when my grandfather then got sick from that horse accident, developed TB, and passed away. And when he died, my mother was only about 15 years old, and the family then moved back to Wyoming to be closer to family, first settling in the Sheridan area, where my grandmother went to work for a dude ranch, and my mother and her sister, younger sister, was 2 years older, and stayed with their aunts and uncles and had a lot of cousins in the area. They were all kind of ranching from Bighorn, Wyoming, over into the Manchester, Dayton area. And after a couple of years, especially Aunt Dot did not like it there. And grandmother decided to move back to Torrington. And her brother, who was older than them, had not moved to Idaho, decided to bring them back to that area to live. At the time they were living in Alliance, Nebraska, where my Uncle Chet had a business that he had started. And my mother did not go there with them. She was farmed out to my great aunt, her aunt in Torrington, Aunt Gay. So that's where she was until she finally married my dad. My earliest childhood memories were probably in the Casper area, where my dad, after the World War II, had gotten a job with a pipeline company, and he was in the process, or that his job was to dig pipelines, particularly from Casper towards Bighorn Basin. Worked a lot in that area, then on up towards Midwest too. I guess I can barely remember maybe being in the Midwest or possibly even Thermopolis, a few times in Casper. Probably all those memories about the same time. We were living in a motel. I remember my brother and I both caught measles in that motel, and I can kind of remember that. That's probably as earliest I can remember. It's probably about maybe 4 years old at the time. I don't know, as a child, I guess in grade school and all, we were living in government housing on the west edge of Casper, and I went to both McKinley School and Garfield School, kind of back and forth during my grade school days. In junior high, I had moved out south of Casper, where my dad was working on a place. And most of the time I was growing up, he was always working on it. We lived first in the basement, and then as he worked on the upstairs, and maybe 2 years later, we moved upstairs in the semi-completed place. Even after I left home, where Vicky and I were married, he was still building onto a garage, and then build a big dining room off of that, and then he built another long hallway along the garage, and put in a pottery studio on the end of it. So he was always working. He was always talking, even to the time when they had to sell the place, putting an observation tower on top of it. But my time then in junior high and high school, I probably lived Indian style. I was always weren't doing chores and all. I just took off in the wilderness. Probably bothered my mother quite a bit, because they needed to saddle a horse or just take off. Nobody knew where I was, and wandered all over the mountain. Those times you'd catch fish in the creek, or you'd catch a rabbit, and I fashioned myself as quite the mountain man and all. Work history during that time, I probably did cowboying for different people in the area. And finally, later in high school, I worked at a church camp on Casper Mountain. Later on, during my college years, I went to work in the summers for the Forest Service and worked there. I went to college 2 years at Casper Junior College. And then I went 1 year at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. And then a year after I got married in Laramie at the University of Wyoming for about a year and a half there. Well, my college training was towards biology. I thought visions of being a forest ranger, and after working in the Forest Service, I got a little bit, didn't know if I really wanted to do that. And then I kind of got into the art, though I even still to this day interested in biology, particularly ecology and wilderness ecology. And then able to get a job at the University of Colorado in Boulder doing textbook illustration work for high school biology books, and then soon did things too for Wyoming Wildlife Magazine, Fur Fishing Game Magazine. During a few years, did a lot of work for the Wyoming Field Science Foundation. Uh, and then at one point then went to work for a printing company in Casper, and was their artist for several years. And soon after that too, then I did some freelance work for a while in commercial art, and then landed a job doing work for different things like a greeting card company in Montana, and did national parkways, guidebooks on national parks, and calendar work, and some book illustration work for them. And all the time, honing my skills as a fine artist and putting on shows and doing artwork myself. Everybody told me I had talent of being an artist, and I always played around with it, even from grade school on. And I remember my brother and my dad would bring home big rolls of paper. We'd roll them out when we were living in the government housing, filled up the whole living room. We'd do like circus parades, and had all kinds of different cages with animals in them, and we'd work on that. And then my grandmother, probably in the time I was about sixth grade, set my brother and I a paint my number set, and we decided that was boring, so we just kind of got out of the lines and forgot the numbers and just started throwing paint on, making our own paintings. So much for paint my number. And for a while, my brother was best at doing, I can't remember, either mountains and water, and maybe I was best at doing hills and skies and things like that. So we collaborate for a while. And then finally, he got too modern with his art. And I just went to doing landscape and wildlife, and mostly did a lot of cowboy Indian type art. And the time too, when we used to ride the school bus, I got to doing some writing too. I was writing Western novels, I thought. And every day on the school bus, I would have to read the stories to all the kids of what I had written the night before on a book I would be writing on. So I even played around with that a little bit. My brother now, he became an architect, got his education, both Casper College and University of Wyoming. Then he went out to Seattle to work for Boeing, like a lot of graduate kids did. And he got stuck in a building with about, I think there was something like 700 people all in one big huge room, these little cubicles. It drove him crazy, so within a few months he quit and started his own architectural firm, which he still has to this day, in the Tacoma, Washington area, actually in Puyallup. I don't know, I guess if I could go back in time, maybe in my 20s, it seems like you got a lot more energy to do things then, and maybe would have wandered around even more than I actually did. My greatest accomplishment was marrying Vicki. She's taken pretty good care of me. Probably just being able to paint has been quite an accomplishment, and making kind of a living at it. Though, as they say, behind every successful artist is a wife with a job, and that's helped over the years. But I guess it's been an accomplishment to be able to say you made it as an artist, and everybody said you weren't going to be able to. I guess some of my favorite music I like is folk music and Western folk type stuff, like Ian Tyson, and though I like some, actually recently even gotten into European type music. Don't understand it all, but I like the beat and the sound of it and all. Advice I would give for all my children, grandchildren, great-grandkids is to be yourself, be honest, be true to yourself, follow your dreams. Even if they tell you you can't do it, you still go ahead and work towards doing it. That's kind of what I did. But to work hard at it and not sit and wait for it. If you want it, you have to go out and get it. I can't really say I have any regrets.
Always remember God, keep Him in your life, and that your family loves you and your mom and dad love you. My dad's parents were born in the United States, and their parents came from Ireland, probably in 1870. And my grandpa Laurie was born in Minnesota. My mom's parents, I know that around 1870 the family came from Ireland, and my mother took care of her mother when I was a baby because her mother had tuberculosis. She took care of her at home. My parents divorced when I was in high school. And then when Gary and I got married in June of '63, we were living in Laramie. And Mother, right after that, met Bob Hildebrand. And she said that they were getting married in November, and we hadn't met him yet. And I was kind of wondering who it was because I knew he worked at the Chevy car dealership, and I had him picked out, but it wasn't the one I picked out, but it was okay. My favorite memory with my parents is when they owned the grocery store, and we lived in the back of the store, and we had a cat, and my job every day was going to the meat case and get some raw liver and give it to the cat. My first childhood memory is probably playing in the backyard on the monkey bars with my brother Fred. I always wanted to be out playing with my brother. I know Mother always bought me dolls, but I would rather have a baseball mitt and a bat or something like that. But that was fine. And my temperament, stubborn probably. I hated to see people fight. I'd do anything to keep from fighting, but I guess I did fight when I was younger. If I could go back in time, I would probably go back into the 60s and the 70s. When our daughters were young, that was a good time. Yeah, I dated Gary's brother for a little while. And then I dated other boys from the youth group at church, and all good friends. So, the lesson I learned from my mother is you have to work for what you want, and that she loved her family no matter what. And the lesson I learned from my real dad was that you didn't have to drink to have a good time. He kind of had a drinking problem, and thank goodness he overcame it in his later years, but it was a problem. My greatest accomplishment was marrying Gary and having Kim and Janet. With Kim, I always knew she was going to be a girl, but with Janet, we didn't know, and Gary said he was going to, if he had a son, the name was going to be Forest Wilderness Kynick. The hardest thing probably was decisions of things when the girls were growing up, and just I don't know. My only regret was that sometimes I wasn't as nice as I should be to other people. My advice to my children and grandchildren is always remember God, keep Him in your life, and that your family loves you and your mom and dad love you. Anything else to know about me is that I can't think of anything right now.
That's perfect, Smokey. Who's your favorite child? Just kidding.
Smokey or Leonard.
Favorite thing about Grandma is she cooks for me, she cleans for me.
Probably my favorite thing about Gary is his sense of humor. Secret to a lasting marriage is to not fight.
Well, just put in your time. Dedication. And you work at it. And you just decided from day one that this is the way it's going to be, for good or better. And just try to make it better all the time. Probably my favorite memory is when I first saw her after Kim was born. And I thought she was the most beautiful woman I ever saw in my life. Just had a glow about her. I guess I'll never forget that.
Probably my favorite memory of Gary is just like when he's able to do his artwork and to go to shows and sell it, and people appreciate what he does.
Probably the most embarrassing thing about Vicki Ivor, on myself anyways, when I went to get a date with her, and Lee Swenson was driving his car and just pushed me out and said, go get a date. And went and asked her, and I was really nervous. And she said yes, and I turned around and ran into a tree.
The most embarrassing thing I remember with Janet is when we lived in Casper, and if people would come over and visit, she would go up to them and ask them when they were leaving. Or she would, or when we would take her to someone's house, and she would say, what smells?
And she's always said, it smells.
Kim and Janet are different, very different. In Casper, Kim's best friend was Teresa, and Janet would hang out with them, but she was 3 years younger. And then Kim never seemed to have a problem at school, making friends. And Janet didn't either, but Janet was just real shy. And then when we moved to Du Bois, Janet just loved it. And Kim said we learned her life, and she asked Grandma Marion to teach her how to play solitaire, because that's all she was going to be able to do after she moved to Du Bois. And Janet, the first week we lived here, it was like below zero, and she would go down and fish every night. Mm-hmm.
She had a snowmobile suit, and she would dress up and go down and fish.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go on hikes and things. Janet would go with me, but Kim never go camping.
She always liked horses. Kim always liked horses.
She was a baby. We had a horse for a while, but finally died because of negligence of a company and everything.
They shut the gate, and the horse was shut from water down at the ranch in Torquay.
Mm-hmm.
It was oil and gas.
Well, it's a uranium company.
Uranium company.
And she had a colt, so we brought the colt to Casper, back up to Casper. That was down at the ranch in Torrington. We brought the colt back up and had it at my dad's place. And go up and feed it in the morning all. And Kim always wanted to go along too. And I never thought it was that good a deal. I hope it never did do damage, but my dad used to set her, being really just a baby, on the little colt's back while we were feeding it milk and all. I always thought, I don't know if we were back strong enough. Mm-hmm. And one day the colt couldn't get up. And his back the vet said his back had quit growing because it was away from its mother's milk too in the beginning and all. I always hoped it was that way, not because we sat Kim on its back. I don't know.
Our first pet together was when Kim was 2 years old, and we moved from Boulder back to Casper, and my brother Fred and I think Mother and Bob got her a little puppy. And he fell off the deck and broke his leg.
Just fell off the porch?
Fell off the porch, yeah. But I think we ended up, the puppy went to live at Albert's Ranch.
Yeah, just was too rambunctious with Kim. She was so little and all.
And we did we have a fenced yard? Yeah, so. Mm-hmm.
It was too big a dog and too.
But then we did get a cat, Charlotte. Charlotte always had one side of her whiskers was shorter than the other because Janet took the scissors and was going to trim her whiskers.
She wanted to be a beauty operator. And then she had a shorter tail too because Janet shut the door on her and chopped her tail off. Charlotte was interesting cat. Dogs used to come around, and when they come to our house, go clear out around the house. One day we were watching her in the backyard, and that's when we had a fence in. She'd sit up on the fence, and the dog would go down the alley. She'd jump on it and beat it up all the way down the alley. Dogs, every dog in the area were scared to death of it. And where he moved up here too, Charlie got
Cancer.
cancer and had to have it put to sleep. But then we had a little dog that kind of showed up around the house. We finally figured out that it was a neighbor's up the road street, and the neighbor didn't want it. It was a cute little puppy called Heidi. When we first moved up here, we still had Heidi, and I guess she got into some antifreeze out here, and we don't know if a bad neighbor up the road gave it to her on purpose or what happened, but he died right away. Then we had Buster for a while. And then we found out it was
Girl, she was kittens.
a girl, so we had to call her Bustina. But we still called her Buster. Was it Charlotte that used to pick on Janet and always, if it went other than outside, it was always an outside cat, so it didn't have a litter box. But sometimes it'd go in Janet's room, go in her bed. I think it's paid back for whiskers and tail.
I think that's it, unless there's anything else.
We're free.
I missed.
My favorite thing about my mom is she is always caring about others and doing for other people. My favorite thing about my dad is he's my dad. He is very caring, willing to help other people, and his also love for God is very important for my mom and dad.
I'm thankful for my mom and dad for always supporting me and being there for me when I need them. And I also love when I go home and I get to go to the house that I grew up in, even my own bedroom, have the river and the warm fireplace, just everything about them. And every grandkid loves Grandma Vicky and Grandpa Gary, and that's why I love them.
My favorite thing about Grandma Vicky is her giving heart. She's always putting others' needs before hers, and I hope someday that I can emulate that in myself. I love that her house is always felt like home to me, and she's such a gracious host to us. And hopefully, I hope that my kids and my grandkids feel the same way about me someday. I think she's a great example of what it is to be a wife, mother, grandmother, and friend. What I love about Grandpa Gary is his love of nature and his knowledge of so many things in nature. I love that he is able to think outside of the box, and he's always up to have fun. And I love his artwork, his talent, and his artistic ability, his way to see something that you might not see in the beauty of nature. And that's what I love about my grandma and grandpa.
My favorite memory of Grandma Vicky is when we were little kids spending the summer in DuBois and always taking those walks after she got off work to go down the slides and go to the park, and then also tubing down the river and playing down on the river by the bridge. My favorite memory of Grandpa Gary is him always letting us play up in his art studio above his house and making our own paintings. And then I always remember, and same with the kids, him just being always so silly, and that's our favorite part of him.
My favorite thing about my Grandpa Gary is his sense of humor, even though when I was little I wasn't always keen to it, and his sense for adventure. I feel like out of everyone in the family, I relate to him a lot. I love that he's an artist. I love that he loves nature, and I love that he's not afraid to have different ideas than those around him or those that he's surrounded by. He is truly himself and authentic, and I always strive to be that way. My favorite thing about my Grandma Vicky is her kind and loving heart. She is the most gentle human being I have ever come across in my life, and I'm so thankful for that. I love that she is always judgment free and she will help anyone that's in need. We all love you so much, Grandma.
My favorite thing about Grandpa Gary is how much he cherishes life, and my favorite thing about Grandma Vicky is how giving and loving she is.
I love you, Grandma Vicky. I love you, Grandma Vicky.
And who?
Grandma Vicky.
And Grandpa.
Gary. Grandpa Gary.